Life, as they say, often throws curveballs when you least expect them. For David Miller, a man whose kindness was as unwavering as his dedication, life had thrown more than its fair share. David was a single father, navigating the choppy waters of life with a quiet resilience that few truly understood. His days were a meticulous dance between his humble job, ensuring food was on the table, and most importantly, being present for his child. He was the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, even if it was the last one he owned. His optimism wasn't naive, it was a deeply ingrained philosophy forged in the fires of adversity. "We'll figure it out, just like we always do," he'd often say, a gentle mantra that saw him through countless lean times. He believed in the intrinsic good of people, in integrity, and in the power of a simple, honest smile. On the other side of the city, in a world of gleaming glass towers and meticulously manicured aspirations, lived Olivia Hayes. Olivia was a force of nature in the corporate world, an ambitious evaluator whose reputation for sharp intellect and unyielding pragmatism preceded her. She moved with a brisk, no-nonsense efficiency, her mind a finely tuned instrument for analysis, profit margins, and the cold, hard facts. For Olivia, emotions were variables, often unreliable, and certainly secondary to the bottom line. "What's the bottom line?" was her signature question, slicing through pleasantries and getting straight to the heart of any matter. She was confident, articulate, and guarded, her polished exterior a testament to years of strategic self-preservation. Yet beneath that formidable facade, a quiet, unacknowledged yearning stirred, a longing for something more than just success, a whisper of a deeper meaning that her analytical mind had yet to quantify. Their paths, it seemed, were destined to cross in the most unexpected way, woven together by an event that threatened to expose the raw truths of wealth, status, and human connection. It began, as many dramatic stories do, with a piece of paper, a thick, cream-colored envelope, embossed with elegant script, resting incongruously on David's modest kitchen table. It was an invitation. Not just any invitation, but one that shimmered with the promise of opulence, a stark contrast to David's world. It was for his ex-wife, Sarah's, wedding. An extravagant affair, no doubt, given her new fiancé's considerable wealth and social standing. The date was circled in his mind like a ticking clock, a reminder of a life he once shared, now long gone, and a chasm that had grown between their worlds. David picked up the card, his thumb tracing the embossed letters. Sarah had moved on, not just to a new partner, but to a life of undeniable luxury, a world David could only glimpse through the pages of glossy magazines his daughter sometimes brought home. There was no bitterness in him, just a quiet ache, a recognition of how far apart their paths had diverged. The invitation, however, wasn't just a notification, it was an expectation, and he knew deep down that his attendance was not just desired, but perhaps even scrutinized, a subtle checkmark on Sarah's list of all loose ends tied up beautifully. He sighed, setting the card back down. The thought of stepping into that world, adorned in his best but still humble suit, felt daunting. It wasn't just about the clothing, it was about the unspoken judgments, the silent comparisons. He wasn't afraid of hard work or scarcity, but he was acutely aware of the social currency he now lacked. How do you navigate a ballroom filled with people who equate worth with wealth when you measure it in resilience and love? Meanwhile, Olivia Hayes was knee-deep in a new project. Her firm had been contracted to evaluate property values in an older district of the city, an area undergoing rapid gentrification. This district happened to be where David's humble apartment was located, a part of the city he still frequented for his work and to visit his elderly neighbor. Olivia, clipboard in hand, strode through the streets, her keen eyes missing nothing. She saw the peeling paint, the worn facades, but her mind instantly translated them into potential investment opportunities, renovation costs, and future profits. She observed the residents with the same dispassionate lens, noting their demographics, their habits, and how they might impact property values. To her, people were simply another data point in the grand economic equation. One afternoon, as David hurried down a bustling street after a long day, a stray gust of wind whipped a flyer from his hand. It spiraled into the air, landing precariously close to an overflowing public trash can. He stooped to retrieve it, and as he did, his eyes met those of an old woman sitting on a grimy bench nearby. Her clothes were threadbare, her hair matted, and a lifetime of hardship was etched onto her face.
Yet there was an unmistakable spark in her eyes, a kind of fierce dignity that belied her circumstances. She didn't beg, she merely watched him with an intensity that made David pause. He offered a small, sympathetic smile. The woman simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and then turned her gaze back to the swirling city around her. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had seen it all, someone who lived on the edges, invisible to most. As David continued on his way, the image of her face lingered, a quiet counterpoint to the glittering invitation waiting on his kitchen table. Two starkly different worlds, two vastly different expressions of humanity, and David, unknowingly, stood at their intersection. The stage was set, not just for a wedding, but for a profound revelation. The wedding invitation lay on David's table like a challenge. Sarah's new fiancé was a successful real estate developer, and their wedding was rumored to be the event of the season, a spectacle of wealth and influence. David knew he had to go, if only for the sake of appearances, and to show his daughter that he was above any lingering animosity. But the thought filled him with a quiet dread. He had one decent suit, well-worn but clean, which he'd painstakingly maintained. The real dilemma, however, wasn't the suit. It was the +1. Everyone would have a date. Stepping into that opulent ballroom alone, a single father on a shoestring budget, felt like walking into a spotlight designed to highlight his perceived inadequacies. He didn't want pity, and he certainly didn't want to become the subject of hushed whispers. Who could he possibly bring? His small circle of friends were all in similar financial straits, and bringing any of them felt like dragging them into an uncomfortable social comparison. He considered not going, but then the image of his daughter's hopeful face, proud of her dad, flashed in his mind. He couldn't let her down, even if she wasn't attending the adult-only event. "We'll figure it out, just like we always do," he murmured to himself, but this time the words felt a little hollow. Days turned into a restless blur of work and worry. David found himself walking through the city with a heightened awareness, a subconscious search for an answer to his +1 problem. It was during one of these walks, past the bustling market, that he saw her again, the old woman from the bench. She was rummaging through a public trash bin, meticulously sifting through discarded newspapers, her movements slow but deliberate. Her name, he would soon learn, was Eleanor.
Eleanor had a grace about her, even in her destitution, that struck David. Her eyes, though clouded with fatigue and age, still held that piercing, intelligent spark he'd noticed before. He watched her for a moment, an odd sense of recognition stirring within him. He remembered his own grandmother, her resilience, her quiet wisdom. Without thinking, David approached her. "Excuse me," he began, his voice soft. "Are you looking for anything specific?" Eleanor looked up, her gaze steady. "Just today's news," she replied, her voice raspy but surprisingly clear. "Always good to know what the world's up to, even from the sidewalk." She offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. David reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a newspaper he'd just bought. "Here," he said, extending it to her. "It's still fresh." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then a grateful nod. "Thank you, young man," she said, taking the paper. "That's very kind of you." They struck up a hesitant conversation. David learned that Eleanor had been on the streets for some time, surviving by her wits, a quiet observer of the human parade. She spoke with an eloquence that belied her circumstances, offering surprising insights into local politics and community happenings. David found himself drawn to her candor, her lack of self-pity, and the depth of experience etched in her eyes. He bought her a warm coffee and a sandwich, not out of charity, but out of a genuine desire to connect with another human being who clearly had a story to tell. As they talked, an idea, wild and audacious, began to form in David's mind. It was a desperate thought, born of his own social anxiety regarding the wedding, yet it felt strangely right. What if? What if he invited Eleanor? The very notion was preposterous, scandalous even in the eyes of the elite guests. But in David's heart, it felt like an act of defiance against superficiality, a testament to the idea that true worth had nothing to do with designer labels or bank accounts. It was a crazy gamble, but it aligned with his unwavering belief in human dignity. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Eleanor," he said, "I have a very unusual proposition for you. I have to attend a wedding next weekend. It's quite a fancy affair, my ex-wife's, and I need a +1. I was wondering if you'd be open to it, if you'd consider coming with me." Eleanor stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. David felt a flush creep up his neck, regretting his impulsive offer. He expected her to laugh, or perhaps to simply dismiss him as a madman. But then, a slow, knowing smile spread across Eleanor's face.
It wasn't a smile of amusement, but one of deep understanding, almost as if she had been waiting for such an invitation her entire life. A fancy wedding, you say? She mused, her eyes twinkling. Well, that certainly would be an adventure, wouldn't it? Young man, I haven't been to a proper social event in decades, but I don't exactly have the attire for such an occasion. That's no problem, David quickly assured her, his heart lifting. I'll take care of everything. We'll get you a dress, a haircut, whatever you need. Just would you consider it? Eleanor looked at him, truly looked at him, with an intensity that seemed to pierce through his humble exterior to the very core of his intentions. She saw the genuine kindness, the quiet challenge he was setting for himself, and perhaps for the world. David, she said, using his name for the first time, her voice firm, I will. It sounds like exactly the kind of story I've been waiting to live.
Meanwhile, Olivia Hayes, driving through the same neighborhood, happened to spot David and Eleanor from her car. She observed David handing Eleanor a newspaper, then watched their conversation unfold. From her perspective, it was an interesting data point. A seemingly struggling man engaging with a visibly homeless woman. Was it charity, a misguided sense of duty, or something else entirely? She jotted down a quick note in her mental ledger. Subject D. Miller, observed interacting with transient, possible emotional instability or naive generosity. Assess impact on community cohesion/property values. She didn't understand the depth of their interaction, the nascent seed of a grand gesture. To Olivia, it was merely an observation, another piece of the puzzle in her constant quest for the bottom line. She had no idea how profoundly these two individuals, one a struggling father, the other a transient, would soon challenge her entire worldview. The days leading up to the wedding became a mission for David. He had made a promise to Eleanor, and he was determined to honor it with all the dignity she deserved. This wasn't just about finding up +1, it was about showing Eleanor, and himself, that kindness and respect transcended social strata. His limited funds meant he had to be resourceful, living up to his own catchphrase more than ever. We'll figure it out, just like we always do. David scoured thrift stores, his keen eye searching for something that would not only fit Eleanor, but also make her feel beautiful. He found a dark, elegant dress, slightly dated but with good lines, and a sturdy pair of low heels. He spent hours cleaning and mending them, even learning a few basic alterations from an old tailor in his building. He convinced a barber friend to give Eleanor a professional haircut and shave for a discounted price, explaining, vaguely, that it was for a special occasion for an elderly friend. He even managed to find a small, delicate brooch, a vintage piece, that added a touch of understated elegance. Eleanor, for her part, met David's efforts with quiet gratitude and an almost regal composure. She allowed herself to be pampered, her eyes shining with an emotion David couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of surprise, delight, and something deeper, something akin to recognition. She told him stories of the city, of its hidden histories and forgotten corners, revealing a sharp mind and an encyclopedic knowledge that fascinated David. He realized he wasn't just helping an old woman, he was spending time with a remarkable individual. You know, David, Eleanor said one afternoon as he ironed the dress in his small apartment, the steam hissing gently, most people look right through me. They see a problem, a statistic, or nothing at all. You see something else. You're a person, Eleanor, David replied simply, focusing on a stubborn wrinkle, just like anyone else, and you deserve to be seen. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and unseasonably warm. David helped Eleanor get ready in his apartment, making sure every detail was perfect. He styled her newly cut hair, helped her with the dress, and pinned the brooch carefully to her lapel. As she looked in the small chipped mirror, a transformation was undeniable. The threadbare clothes were gone, replaced by a dark elegance. The matted hair was now a dignified silver bob. But it was her eyes that truly sparkled, no longer just weary, but alive with a quiet anticipation. You look beautiful, Eleanor, David said, a genuine warmth in his voice. Eleanor smiled, a full, radiant smile that briefly erased the decades of hardship from her face. Thank you, David, truly. Together, they made their way to the lavish venue, a historic estate on the outskirts of the city. As they approached, the scale of the event became clear. Luxury cars lined the winding driveway, their polished surfaces reflecting the sunlight. Guests, dressed in designer attire, mingled on the manicured lawns, their laughter light and carefree. David felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a sense of being out of place. But then he looked at Eleanor. She walked with a serene confidence, her head held high,
as if she belonged there more than anyone. Her presence gave him strength. As they stepped into the grand reception area, the murmurs of the crowd seemed to swell. Heads turned. Whispers began. David, in his carefully maintained suit, was recognizable to a few as Sarah's ex-husband, but Eleanor, a completely unknown quantity. Her modest yet elegant attire stood out amidst the opulent gowns and bespoke suits. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't trendy, but there was an unmistakable aura of dignity about her. Lily, a socialite known for her sharp tongue and even sharper observations, was among the first to notice them. She nudged her friend. "Look, there's David Miller, Sarah's ex. And who on earth is that with him? Good heavens, he brought her to this wedding?" Her whisper, though intended for her friend, carried further than she intended, sparking a chain reaction of curiosity and judgment. The stares were palpable. Some were openly disdainful, others merely curious, but all carried an unspoken judgment. David felt the heat of it, but he kept his hand gently on Eleanor's arm, guiding her, his expression unwavering. Eleanor, remarkably, seemed unfazed. She met curious glances with a polite nod, her eyes observing everything with a calm, almost detached interest. Olivia Hayes was also present, having been invited by a business associate of the groom. She stood apart from the main throng, her analytical gaze sweeping the room. She was assessing not just the property, but the guests, the networking potential, the subtle power dynamics at play. When her eyes landed on David and Eleanor, a jolt of recognition went through her. The subject, she thought, and the transient, here, at this wedding? Her brow furrowed. This was an unexpected variable. She observed their entrance, the immediate ripple of gossip, the unconcealed disdain on some faces. Olivia prided herself on being above such petty judgments, yet she couldn't help but feel a flicker of analytical skepticism. Why would David do this? Was it an act of protest? A desperate cry for attention? A bizarre attempt at making a statement? She filed it away as an anomaly, something to be dissected later. Her initial cynical assessment of David's naive generosity seemed to be confirmed. He was deliberately out of place, seemingly inviting scorn. Sarah, the bride, caught sight of David and Eleanor from across the room. Her smile faltered, her perfectly composed features briefly contorting into a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled anger. She exchanged a tense whisper with her new husband, Richard, a man whose expensive suit seemed to bristle with irritation. David saw their reaction, and for a fleeting moment a wave of regret washed over him. Had he gone too far? Had he embarrassed Eleanor? But then Eleanor squeezed his arm reassuringly, her eyes meeting his. "Don't worry, David," she murmured, her voice calm and steady. "Let them talk. We are here, and that is what matters." Her composure was infectious. David straightened his shoulders. He hadn't brought Eleanor to cause a scene, but to show respect, and to defy the superficiality that permeated this world. If others couldn't see past appearances, that was their failing, not theirs. As the evening progressed, the tension simmered. David tried to keep a low profile, finding a quiet corner with Eleanor, but their presence was a magnet for whispers. A few brave guests approached, feigning politeness but clearly fishing for information. One particularly brazen woman, Mrs. Davies, a distant relative of Richard, approached them with a saccharine smile. "David, darling, so lovely to see you," she cooed, her eyes pointedly assessing Eleanor. "And who is your charming companion? I don't believe I've had the pleasure." "This is Eleanor," David said, his tone firm, "a very dear friend." "Eleanor," Mrs. Davies repeated, drawing out the name, her smile never reaching her eyes. "How quaint. You look very comfortable. I do hope you're enjoying the caviar. Richard insisted on the best, you know. Only the absolute best for his Sarah." Eleanor simply inclined her head. "It's certainly an experience, Mrs. Davies," she said, her voice dry, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. "Quite different from my usual fare." Mrs. Davies chuckled, a brittle, dismissive sound. She clearly thought she had put Eleanor in her place. David felt his jaw tighten, but Eleanor's steady gaze held his. "Patience, young man," her eyes seemed to say. Olivia, watching from a discreet distance, saw the exchange. She noted David's unwavering support, Eleanor's quiet dignity, and Mrs. Davies's thinly veiled condescension. Her analytical mind, usually so quick to categorize and judge, found itself in a rare state of confusion. There was something about Eleanor, a quiet strength, and unusual resilience that didn't quite fit the transient label. And David, his actions, though seemingly irrational from a pragmatic standpoint, radiated a profound integrity that was hard to dismiss. The bottom line here wasn't clear at all. This was turning into more than just a social experiment. It was becoming a test of human values. The wedding reception moved into the lavish ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered, reflecting off polished marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, delicate food, and unspoken judgments. David and Eleanor had found a small table at the very back, away from the main hubbub, trying to blend in, though their presence was anything but unnoticeable. Richard, the groom, was about to give his toast, a moment usually reserved for platitudes and grand pronouncements. Richard tapped a champagne flute with a spoon, and the room fell silent. He stood tall, impeccably dressed, a picture of success. Sarah beamed beside him, her hand linked through his. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice booming with confidence, "thank you all for coming to celebrate this truly momentous occasion. Marrying Sarah is the greatest decision of my life, and I look forward to building a future of unparalleled prosperity and happiness with her." He raised his glass, and the guests echoed his sentiment, though David noticed the emphasis on prosperity. As Richard lowered his glass, his eyes swept the room, and for a fleeting moment they landed on Eleanor. A flicker of something, confusion, perhaps annoyance, or even a hint of something deeper crossed his face. He seemed to dismiss it, about to continue with his toast, when a new voice, clear and resonant, cut through the air. "Richard," the voice began, surprising everyone. It was Eleanor. She had risen from her chair, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the groom. The small, unassuming woman, who had been the subject of so many whispers, now commanded the attention of the entire room. A gasp rippled through the guests. Lily, from her table, gasped loudly, "I can't believe what I just saw. She's actually speaking." Sarah looked horrified, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard's face paled, his confident demeanor crumbling. "Eleanor," he stammered, his voice losing its authoritative edge, What are you doing?"
"What am I doing, Richard?" Eleanor repeated, a wry smile playing on her lips. "I believe I'm attending a wedding, one that, if I recall, was meant to be a celebration of love and unity, and perhaps a substantial merger of assets." The room buzzed with confusion. People exchanged bewildered glances. David, initially stunned, felt a surge of protectiveness, ready to intercede, but Eleanor's steady gaze held him back. Olivia Hayes, however, had an entirely different reaction. Her sharp, analytical mind, which had been registering Eleanor as an anomaly, suddenly snapped into hyperfocus. The name, the subtle shift in Richard's composure, the way Eleanor carried herself, it all clicked. A sudden, impossible theory formed in her mind, sending a chill down her spine. "Richard," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength, "do you truly believe I wouldn't recognize you, even after all these years? And do you truly believe I wouldn't notice what you've become?" She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "My grandson," she stated, her voice now ringing with authority, "you have truly outdone yourself in your pursuit of superficiality." The room erupted. Gasps, shocked murmurs, and outright exclamations filled the air. Richard's face was ashen. Sarah looked as if she might faint. The collective confusion gave way to dawning comprehension for some and utter bewilderment for others. Lily, eyes wide, whispered to her friend, "Grandson? Is she that Eleanor? The one who disappeared years ago? Richard's grandmother, the reclusive philanthropist, Eleanor Vance?" The truth, once spoken, hit like a thunderclap. Eleanor Vance was a legendary figure in the city's high society, a fiercely independent, immensely wealthy matriarch who had mysteriously vanished years ago after a personal tragedy, widely believed to have retreated from public life entirely or even passed away. Her vast fortune, much of it tied up in charitable trusts, was a subject of endless speculation, and Richard, her only living relative, was rumored to be desperately trying to gain control of it. "Grandmother," Richard choked out, recovering his voice, though it trembled, "what are you doing here? And looking like that?" He gestured dismissively at her modest dress, his face a mix of shame and fury. "Looking like that?" Eleanor Vance replied, her eyes flashing. "This, my dear grandson, is what genuine kindness looks like. This is what integrity looks like." She turned, her hand gently resting on David's arm. "For the past 2 years, after suffering a profound loss and feeling utterly disgusted by the avarice of the world I inhabited, I chose to disappear. I wanted to see humanity without the veil of wealth, without the pretense of power. I wanted to understand what truly moves people, what truly endures. I have lived on the streets, an invisible woman, observing, learning. And in all that time, Richard, with all your purported success and influence, not once does you seek me out with genuine concern. You only ever inquired about my assets, my will, my legacy."
She swept her gaze across the stunned faces in the room. And then, just when I was beginning to lose faith, when the cynicism was settling deep into my bones, I met this man. She looked at David, a warmth flooding her eyes that David's heart swelled. David Miller, Eleanor continued, her voice clear and powerful, a man who, despite his own struggles, saw me not as a statistic, not as a burden, but as a person. He offered me a newspaper, a warm meal, and then the most extraordinary invitation, to attend this wedding not out of pity, but out of a simple, profound respect for my humanity. Richard sputtered, But grandmother, we thought you were—
Gone, Eleanor finished for him, a bitter edge to her voice. Indeed, and in my absence, you and your fiancée, Sarah, have been rather busy, haven't you? Consolidating your social standing, leveraging the family name, and yes, preparing to merge with Sarah's family, whose financial troubles you've been so eager to rescue, using funds you assumed would soon be yours. The room was in chaos. Sarah looked utterly devastated, her carefully constructed facade shattering. The wedding guests, a moment ago so prim and proper, were now a tableau of open-mouthed shock, whispers turning into frantic exclamations. Olivia Hayes, still rooted to her spot, watched David. His face, initially stunned, now held a quiet triumph, a vindication that spoke volumes. The bottom line had just been revealed, and it had nothing to do with profit or property values. It was about character. It was about the immeasurable worth of integrity and kindness. Her analytical mind, once so focused on material assessment, was recalibrating itself in real time, acknowledging a truth far more profound than any she had ever encountered. So, Eleanor Vance concluded, addressing the silent, awestruck room, her voice now a commanding pronouncement, while this wedding was intended to celebrate your future, Richard, and the joining of your fortunes, I must clarify something. My fortune, what little of it is left after 2 years of unmonitored philanthropy and a quiet life on the streets, will not be at your disposal. And as for my legacy, it will be built upon genuine human connection, not upon calculated acquisitions. She looked directly at David, a radiant, almost conspiratorial smile on her face. Now, if you'll excuse us, she said, taking David's arm firmly, David and I have had quite enough of this spectacle. It's time for us to find a place where honesty and kindness are truly celebrated. And with a regal nod, she led David out of the stunned ballroom, leaving behind a scene of utter pandemonium, her homeless presence having unequivocally stolen the spotlight. The departure of Eleanor Vance, the reclusive matriarch, and David's unexpected date left an indelible mark on everyone present. The meticulously planned wedding reception had devolved into an unforgettable exposé. Richard stood, humiliated, his carefully constructed ambitions crumbling around him. Sarah was distraught, her dream of a lavish future now hanging by a precarious thread. The guests, initially shocked into silence, soon broke into a cacophony of whispers, gossip, and a rapid reevaluation of everything they thought they knew. Lily, her eyes wide, could only repeat, "I can't believe what I just saw. This is incredible." Outside the ballroom, under the soft glow of the evening sky, David and Eleanor walked away, the sounds of the chaotic reception fading behind them. David was still reeling, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within him. "Eleanor," he began, I had no idea. You're Eleanor Vance?" Eleanor chuckled, a genuine, mirthful sound. "Indeed, David, though for the past 2 years I was simply Eleanor, a woman finding her way in a world that often prefers to ignore those without status. You, my dear young man, were the first to truly see me without my title or my lack of it." She squeezed his arm. "And what an adventure you gave me!" David smiled, a profound sense of relief and quiet triumph washing over him. His act of kindness, born of compassion and a desire to challenge superficiality, had not only been vindicated, but had also revealed a hidden truth that shook the foundations of high society. Meanwhile, Olivia Hayes found herself unable to move. She had witnessed the entire scene, her analytical mind struggling to process the sheer human drama that had unfolded. Her bottom line had just been redefined. She had always valued facts, data, and measurable outcomes, but what she had just seen transcended all metrics. David Miller, the subject she had initially labeled as possibly having naive generosity or emotional instability, had proven to be a man of extraordinary integrity and compassion. Eleanor, the transient, was in fact a woman of immense power and profound wisdom. Olivia's worldview, so meticulously constructed on logic and pragmatism, had cracked open. She saw the raw, undeniable power of human connection, the inherent dignity in every individual, regardless of their outward circumstances. The snobbery and materialism she had dismissed as mere societal quirks now appeared as grotesque distortions of human value. Her long unacknowledged longing for deeper meaning suddenly roared to life. This wasn't just an observation, it was an epiphany. A few days later, a discreet but unmistakable message arrived for David Miller. It was from Eleanor Vance. She expressed her deepest gratitude, and in a gesture that left David speechless, informed him that she was establishing a significant foundation dedicated to supporting single parents and at-risk youth, a foundation that would bear his name as a co-founder, and, crucially, that she wanted him to be actively involved in its direction. "Your vision, David," her note read, "is far more valuable than any financial expertise." This new foundation was also dedicated to fostering a network of shelters and support systems that saw the homeless not as problems, but as people with stories, dignity, and potential. David's life, of course, changed dramatically. The foundation provided him with a secure and meaningful purpose, allowing him to care for his child with greater ease and to extend his inherent kindness to countless others. He used his new platform to advocate for empathy and understanding, always remembering his own struggles. He never forgot the quiet strength of Eleanor, and their unlikely friendship became a beacon of hope for many. But the transformation wasn't limited to David. Olivia Hayes, too, found herself irrevocably altered. The incident at the wedding had shaken her to her core. She returned to her work, but with a fundamentally different lens. The numbers still mattered, but now the human element weighed equally, if not more, heavily. She started looking beyond the cold data, seeking out the stories, the people behind the figures. Her bottom line now included empathy, community impact, and the less tangible but no less real value of human dignity. One afternoon, a few weeks after the wedding, Olivia found herself walking through David's old neighborhood again, no longer just evaluating property, but truly seeing the community. She spotted David, laughing with a group of children, his daughter by his side. She approached him, not with her usual brisk professionalism, but with a newfound humility. "David," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. He turned, surprised. "Olivia, hello. I just wanted to say," she began, a rare hesitance in her tone, "what you did at the wedding, what Eleanor revealed, it was truly remarkable, and I misjudged you, terribly. I saw you through a very narrow lens, and I apologize." David smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "We all have our blind spots, Olivia. It's how we learn from them that matters." "Indeed," she replied, a genuine warmth spreading through her. "I'm reevaluating my own bottom line, as it were. I realize there's far more to value than just profit." She paused, then offered, "I heard about the foundation. If you ever need any professional assistance, any analytical insights, not for profit but for people, please don't hesitate. I'd be honored to help."
David looked at her, truly seeing the shift in her eyes. "Thank you, Olivia. We'll figure it out, just like we always do. And I think, with people like you on board, we'll figure out even more." The story of the single dad who took a homeless woman to his ex's wedding and how she stole the spotlight, that sometimes the most extraordinary lessons come from the most unexpected places, delivered by the most unassuming heroes, and that true value, the ultimate bottom line, is found in the simple, unwavering dignity of the human spirit.